So there's a brand new Space Marine heavy tank out and about. Let's talk about the Kratos heavy tank and the new Deimos pattern Rhino. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd take a quick look at the weekend's armoured model reveals. That leaked Horus Heresy launch box was unveiled, but one of the most interesting things in their reveal show was that the Space Marines are going to be receiving a brand new heavy tank called the Kratos, and sort of somewhere between a Sicaran tank and a Fellblade. There's also a nice new resculpt of the Deimos pattern Rhino, so I thought we'd take a look at both of those kits and talk about what we know about them. First up, the Kratos is maybe the biggest surprise. Really quite a large Space Marine tank that's going to be coming out as part of the Horus Heresy big release. They're going to be redoing a whole bunch of Space Marine kits in plastic for the Horus Heresy launch. A whole bunch of things have gone missing from the web store, including things like the Leviathan Dreadnoughts, so I was kind of expecting to see new resculpted things like the Deimos Rhino, but a new heavy tank is maybe a bit of a surprise. This Kratos tank is maybe a little bit smaller than most super heavy vehicles. I don't know whether it'd fall quite on the line between Lord of War or heavy support slot in 40k. It might be kind of close to the borderline. Supposedly this was a big heavy tank in use a bit earlier in the Horus Heresy, though it was gradually retired in favour of the faster and more flexible Predator tanks, rendering this older design kind of obsolete. A whole bunch of chapters did keep reserves of them in their armories though. In particular, they mentioned that the Blood Angels have reserves of them. I think in the lore and background, they aren't really a thing that already exists in Horus Heresy, so I guess they're kind of retconning them into the background a little bit. I think that they have been mentioned maybe briefly in passing in one of the Horus Heresy novels. In any case, being obsolete to the Predator, which in current 40k seems to be having challenges from the Primaris Gladiator. They said that the Kratos tank is all but extinct in 40k itself, though I think it's fairly likely that they might well get a relic datasheet at some point, the same way that you can field things like Leviathan Dreadnoughts or Sicaran tanks. They were asked this on stream during the reveal show, but they just said they didn't know. Hopefully when the actual model kit releases, they'll give it some token 40k rules, perhaps a digital download one if possible. The standard armament of the tank appears to be the Kratos battle cannon with a coaxial autocannon, 2 heavy bolters, and some las cannon sponsons. The tank itself is really quite reminiscent of both the Sicaran and the Fellblade. It seems to me if you took both of those kits and just took an average of the two of them, then this is what you might get. Other than the primary weapons, there are a bunch of other choices that you can take on it. The Kratos battle cannon looks like the flexibility option with the option to fire a few different types of shells, but you can swap it out for the big Volkite weapon called the Volkite Cardinal. I feel like GW really do quite enjoy coming up with new weird words for Volkite weapons. And the other option is a Melter Blast Gun, a dedicated close-range armor hunter. Otherwise, the sponsons can be swapped out for heavy bolters or Volkite weapons. Supposedly there will also be an option for heavy flamers as well. And if you want to really live up to its supposed role as a line breaker, there's an absolutely enormous dozer blade that you can mount to the tank. That thing really does look pretty vicious, and not the sort of thing I'd want to get in the way of. Just to get a sense of scale, here's a size comparison versus the Horus Heresy Marines. Maybe a bit smaller than something like a Baneblade, but probably similar size or bigger than a Land Raider. So certainly a very meaty looking tank, particularly when it's packing that kind of firepower. Here's just a picture of a Sicaran tank as well for a bit of comparison. You also can't currently buy the main Sicaran battle tank either, so it seems quite likely that that one might be coming as a resin to plastic reimagination as well. Otherwise, for Heresy rules, a bunch of the playtest rules did get out early. I think these were spotted a good time before the actual tank was unveiled itself. Otherwise, in terms of options, it also looks like you can replace those hull-mounted heavy bolters for Volkite calivers, autocannons, or las cannons. It can take pintle-mounted things, and it doesn't look like it's got any option to not take the sponsons, so you do have to take those along. Overall, a really fun-looking tank. Hopefully it does get a 40k datasheet. I'm sure a fair few people would be tempted by this. I do quite like the look of the Sicaran type tanks myself. Previously being in rather expensive resin though was definitely a turn-off. The Kratos wasn't the only Space Marine armoured vehicle previewed though. Kind of as suspected, as it went missing from the Forge World web store, the Deimos pattern Rhino is returning in plastic. The Heresy era Rhino pattern, whose model I believe was initially made by Forge World to be very similar to the plastic Games Workshop design, the one that predated the current Games Workshop Rhino kit, the one that hasn't really been changed too much for quite some time now. Size-wise though, unlike that really ancient Rhino kit, this one is basically the same size as a standard Space Marine Rhino. You can see the proportions are really similar looking here. So if you did just want a cool different Rhino sculpt to field with your Space Marines or Chaos Marines in 40k, you could go for this one. Definitely could be fun to give an army a bit more of a retro or heresy era vibe. In particular, I don't really see why Chaos Space Marines couldn't make very good use of this. A lot of their rhinos would have been taken along from the days when these were the norm, so it seems that it kind of makes sense that they'd have a fair few in their arsenals. Here's just a few rhino tanks side by side. The very old one is the original plastic rhino, the middle one is the previous Forge World resin kit, and the new one is the new plastic one, which I think largely has been quite faithful to the Forge World resin one. A few bits have been polished, but the vibe is very much the same. It's still got the two different independently firing bolters as well, harking back to that classic kit. Otherwise, this too has a few different options as well. You can put the bolters together and field it as a combi bolter, and Heresy era rhinos do have a fair few fun options that the standard ones in Warhammer 40k don't have. You can have a guy firing out the top hatch with a heavy bolter or a multi-melter, or you can blaze away with a Havoc launcher whether you're loyalist or traitor. The new and updated Havoc launcher for this does look fairly similar to the Contemptor Dreadnought one. Overall, I think it's really quite a cool kit, and I think it's pretty good fun to see a fair chunk of the really old Forge World range getting reincarnated in plastic. There's a lot of stuff that's been around for a good long time and hasn't really seen any major updates. Overall, I think they were fairly exciting things, and quite nice to see something in addition to just the announcement of the box set, which we kind of already knew was coming. I think out of the two of these, the Kratos is maybe the more interesting one, but also feels like it might be a bit more niche and less useful than most normal games. Even if Games Workshop does get round to releasing a 40k datasheet for this thing, I suspect it might go into the big pile of Forge World ones that aren't particularly strong. I guess if you are fielding a fair amount of Dangerous Firstborn, or any number of a few different Chaos Marine forces, then the Deimos Rhino could well be worth looking into. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Allspec Tactics. I'll certainly try and keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases as they come out. If they ever do release a datasheet for the Kratos tank for 40k, I'll certainly review it here on the channel. Finally, if you have been enjoying a fair few videos on the channel, I would just like to mention one way in which you can help support. If you're interested, then Allspec Tactics does have a Patreon page which is down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is the thing that allows me to focus on making videos like this quite so often, so if you are enjoying it all, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.